You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
The 107th running of the Indianapolis 500 comes up Monday morning New Zealand time. 200 laps, 500 miles. Two Kiwis in the field. One, of course, who has tasted victory at this event before.
Coming through turn number 4, Scott Dixon is going to complete his perfect storm with a win at the Indianapolis 500.
Yeah, that's Scott Dixon winning the race in 2008. He'll start from 6th on the grid this time. Scott McLaughlin will start from 14th. And Scott Dixon's Chip Ganassi racing teammate Alex Palou will start from pole, qualifying at a speed of 234.217 miles per hour. Incredible. Jack Benyon is the American editor at the race. He's director at 24 Racing Media Limited and a highly experienced journalist specialising in motorsport video and podcasting. He joins us now. Jack, thanks for taking the time to join us across New Zealand. Can you put this into context for our Kiwi audience? How big an event is the Indianapolis 500?
Well, to answer that question simply, it's the world's biggest single-day sporting event. There's going to be well over 300,000 people in attendance when it comes to the Sunday of the race. So there's a lot of excitement here in Indiana, in Indianapolis. This event really takes over and increases the population of the city itself massively by obviously having so many people come into the town, not just on the race day and on the race day weekend, but also in with the unique format with qualifying being the weekend before as well. It really helps with tourism and stuff like that. So it's a massive event. There's lots of traditions. Obviously, the race itself is well over 100 years old. So there's plenty of things that have kind of happened over the years that have been adopted into the event's kind of folklore, if you like. So there's a lot of interesting traditions, and there's absolutely nothing like race day. They really do it properly over here and do a really good job of it. So the race day morning is absolutely spectacular. And if you get the chance to tune in for some of the pre-race ceremonies, it's definitely worthwhile.
What did we learn from qualifying, and how important is grid position in the Indy 500?
Well, qualifying is interesting because the cars are quite a bit different to how they run in the race. So in qualifying, the cars are what the Americans call trimmed out, which means they remove downforce from the car, allowing the cars to travel at a higher speed. So that's what allowed you to see speeds of 235 miles an hour in qualifying, which is incredible. But when we come to the race, we put more downforce on the car because the cars are expected to run long stints, many laps, sometimes in high temperatures, which wears the tyres, and the cars will slow over the course of a stint. So the cars are set up very differently for the race in order to kind of help with those problems that they face. And the team that wins on Sunday one of the things that team will have to do is to tweak their car through the race to make sensible changes to the wings and the aerodynamics of the car, and also the tire pressures and things like that to keep on top of the handling for the driver. So it's a long race. It's 200 laps. The circuit itself is 2.5 miles. So over the course of the race, it's going to be really challenging for the drivers. They're going to have to face many different problems with the handling of the car, and of course they're in big. A 33 pack of cars, if you like. Everybody wants to get to the front. Everyone's trying to overtake the next person. So it's a very difficult race to win. You have to have a lot of things go in your favour. It's not just about driving talent. You need to have a brilliant car. You need to have a lot of fortune with strategy and pit stops. Pit stops are such a key element of the Indy 500. One of the places where people can really make up time and move forward. So there's many elements of this race that make it one of the toughest to win in the world.
From how far back on the grid is it possible to win the Indy 500? Do you have to be in the top 10 on the grid to win it?
It's an interesting one because the event is so old. There's lots of stats for where people have won from on the grid. So I think almost pretty much every spot of the 33 has won the race. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 spots that haven't, but in recent years the race has become much more track position orientated, but that doesn't mean you can't come from further back. And especially this year, it seems like a bit of a cliche to say it maybe, but the field is just so close at the moment. All of these teams, we've had this, the actual chassis of the car has been in use for over 10 years now. So the teams know the cars well. There's still areas of development that go on in the background that do change things, but the fundamental aspect of the car being the same means that the teams over the years are moving closer and closer together. And this year we've seen that with the closest front row we've ever seen in qualifying. And when it gets to the race, it's going to be a similar story. There's going to be, some people think there's between 10 and 15 cars that could win this race, which is, absolutely spectacular when you think about that. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens on Sunday. I personally think you're looking at maybe the top 22 are the kind of realistic options to win this race. And even then, that's stretching it quite far back. I think the winner will almost certainly come from the top kind of 15 to 12, I would say. But I wouldn't absolutely rule out someone coming from sort of around 22nd. But one of the interesting things about this race is, as I said already, it's 200 laps long and the circuit's 2.5 miles. The stints are very long. A stint is like how long you stay out on the track without pitting or taking on fuel and tyres. So the strategy comes in when you pit, when you have your fresh tyres, when you add the fuel, all of these things play into the race, and they sometimes can mean that someone from the back of the grid can, on a different strategy that somehow plays out, can win the race. So it's always a fascinating spectacle of a race, not just for the speeds and the overtaking that we see, but also for the strategy and those people who are paid to look at that from behind the scenes and try to win the race for these teams.
Over here in New Zealand, we keenly follow, of course, both the Scots, Scott Dixon and Scott McLaughlin. As I say, Dixon 6th on the grid, McLaughlin 14th. How do you assess their respective chances?
Well, let's start with Dixon. It was a shame not to see him break the record of no one's ever had 3 Indy 500 poles in a row. So it was a shame not to see him get that. His previous 2 poles were incredible. And the pole that he set last year was the record pole time until this year, which is, he's now been beaten by Alex Palou, who obviously is not a Kiwi, but does love eating kiwis. So that's an interesting fact about him for you. But Scott Dixon, definitely really excited for this month. If you remember, if you watched the race last year, he was ruled out of kind of winning the race by speeding in pit lane by just 1 mile per hour, which ruled him out of being able to win the race that he dominated from start to finish. So there's an interesting kind of thing at play here with the fact that in America, obviously, we tend to see the single sporting events like the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup are the big targets for these sportsmen. Whereas in Europe and maybe in New Zealand motorsport as well, you tend to get people more focused on a championship kind of perspective. Scott Dixon's won 6 championships in IndyCar now, so he definitely necessarily doesn't need to win any more of those to cement his legacy. But he only has the 1 Indy 500 win, and that's a big thing for Scott Dixon because he feels like he should have won at least 2 or 3 more with things moving outside of his control in terms of strategy and races and things like that. So he told me he's approaching this race with the idea that he just wants to enjoy it. There's so many events and sponsor things and so many demands on the drivers over the course of this month to perfect their cars and their preparation for the Indy 500 that it can kind of zap that fun out of it a little bit. But Scott told me he's absolutely desperate after last year to just make sure that he enjoys this event, and he's off to a good start. On Friday, he won the pit stop competition with his team, which is great. It's a little event they do on Carb Day here at Indy to kind of get the pit crews moving around and put a bit of a show on for the fans. So Dixon and his Ganassi team won that, so that was really cool. And yeah, I guess moving on to Scott McLaughlin. He would have probably been the top Penske in the race last year if he hadn't have crashed. So he'll be coming in with, knowing that he has the skill and the ability to do well in this race. He's on a bit of a high at the moment here in the US. He appeared significantly in the first episode of a new documentary series that's running about the IndyCar series called 100 Days to Indy, where he and his wife Carly were kind of featured quite heavily in the first episode. So if and when that gets brought over to New Zealand, you'll be able to watch that in a little bit more detail. I think the overriding theme of Scott is his team Penske, which is historically the best team to ever race at the Speedway. It's one of the most respected and best teams in North American motorsport, but they've really struggled in qualifying for the past 3 years now at the Indy 500. So Scott starting 14th, second of the Penske drivers, and the Penske team look a bit stronger in race running from what we've seen this year. So if you're a fan of Scott McLaughlin, then don't be too worried about his qualifying position. It's not ideal, but the race running that we've seen in practice hints at the fact that Scott could definitely move forward on race day.
All right, Jack, give us a winner and a dark horse, perhaps.
Oh, that's a good one. It's a difficult one. I actually think Scott McLaughlin's a good kind of dark horse pick, only because he's not a dark horse from an ability standpoint or an expectation standpoint, but from where he's starting, he is right at the back end of where you'd expect that winner to come from. So I'll try and please your listeners a bit and go for Scott McLaughlin as my dark horse. I think Alex Palou is difficult to look past as a winner. It's not necessarily always the person on pole who wins the Indy 500. In fact, more often than not, it probably goes the other way, or it has in recent years anyway. But he's looked absolutely fantastic all month. He's in a really good spot. He's a series champion in 2021, and with that Ganassi team that just seems to be really strong at the Indy 500. I guess, to give you another kind of option there, I think Pato O'Ward would be someone to watch for McLaren. I know there's a lot of McLaren fans in New Zealand who'll be watching closely. Might enjoy that the team's running a special Triple Crown livery, which kind of evokes some of the memories of their successes in Le Mans and some of these places as well. So definitely go and check out the liveries of the McLaren cars. But Pato O'Ward's another driver who's looked really strong. He was second last year in the race, and is always a good bet on an oval. He's one of the best young oval drivers in the series, so he'll be someone to watch as well.
Fantastic. Just to finish, Jack, in order to cover this race or attend as a spectator, and you talked about 400,000 people there, how early do you have to leave to get there? Where does everyone park?
It's incredible. I think the stat is that you can fit 18 football stadiums inside the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so it's not a small facility. There's plenty of room inside, and they have a lot of car parking kind of outside as well. But you're right, it's a logistical nightmare on race day for sure. You have to be getting to the circuit, to be honest, between 4 and 5 a.m. if you're going to get in without any problems with traffic. As a journalist, at least, if you're a fan, you can probably risk getting here maybe 6, 7 a.m. in the morning. But this year's going to be, we've seen the attendances increasing, to be honest, year on year. The 2016 event was the 100th running of the Indy 500, and that has broke pretty much all of the historical records for attendance and things like that. But this is the closest year we've been to any of those records, and I think they think they're about between 5,000 and 3,000 tickets away from selling out, which is an absolutely spectacular feat when you think about it. And it's I guess from a logistical point of view, we don't really know how Sunday's going to look with more people being here than even last year. But yeah, I'll tell you what, it's going to be an early start for me, and it's going to be a late night. So I hope I get some sleep tomorrow night, or I'm going to be in deep trouble. Oh,
brilliant. Jack, you've provided brilliant insight and analysis for us across New Zealand. We can't wait for the race Monday morning our time. Thanks for taking the time for a chat.
Absolutely. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Jack Benyon there, US-based motorsport journalist, head of the Indy 500 Monday morning. Scott Dixon, Scott McLaughlin, both involved. We'll have more on the Indy 500 for you on the show tomorrow.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday, or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.